Most people assume that the spouse is the only one who can file a wrongful death claim. But then a parent or sibling calls me. They're in grief, they're unsure, and they feel like they're completely in the dark. And if you file your claim the wrong way, or you wait too long, you can lose your only shot at justice. No settlement, no trial, no second chance. I'm Max the Axe, the gold standard in personal injury, and I've seen it happen way too often where families don't know what to do in cases just like this. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly who is eligible to file, as well as when and what to expect so that you don't get sidelined when it matters most. And stay with me to the end, because there's one timing mistake, and if you make it, it doesn't just slow down your case, it completely ends it. All right, let's start with the big question. Who is legally allowed to file a wrongful death claim in Texas? Texas wrongful death is strict about who can bring a claim, and that can surprise a lot of people because feeling grief doesn't fall into neat little categories like the law does. So I'm going to make this as simple and clear as possible. In Texas, the people who can file a wrongful death claim are the spouse, the parents, and the children. That is the list. Not close family, not the ones who love them the most. It's just spouses, children, and parents. Now let's talk about why the law is set up that way, because it'll help you understand the rest. Why wrongful death claims exist in Texas. A wrongful death claim exists when someone dies because of another person or company's negligence, recklessness, carelessness, or mistake. Car wrecks, truck crashes, medical negligence, dangerous property, problems with products. There's a lot of ways that someone's negligence or a company's negligence can lead to the loss of human life. And the concept of a wrongful death claim is simple. If that person had lived, they could have brought an injury claim. But the idea is simple. Wrongful death lets certain family members bring a claim for the harm the death has caused them. And that's an important point. Wrongful death is not the estate of the deceased suing for the harm that was caused to them. It's the family suing for what they have lost. Loss of support, companionship, parental guidance, the emotional and financial hit that a family takes when the loved one is lost. Now, who gets to bring this claim is usually where people get tripped up, so let's break down the priority group that the law recognizes. The immediate family who has a right to file. The surviving spouse. If you are legally married, you can file. And yes, Texas recognizes informal marriages in certain situations, sometimes called common law marriage. And that situation can matter a whole lot in wrongful death cases, but it's also what gets challenged the most often. So if you're in that situation, it's important to talk to a lawyer as soon as possible, because proving that common law marriage can be an entire fight of its own. Children. Children can file too. That includes both biological and legally adopted children. Adult children count as well. It's not just people under 18. If the child is a minor, then that child's claim is usually handled through an adult who acts on their behalf, but that claim of the child still exists. Parents. Parents can file as well, even if the deceased was an adult, even if the parents are divorced, even if the deceased had their own spouse and their own children. Parents still have standing under Texas law. And here's the part that people often don't realize. The family can file the lawsuit together, or one family member can file on behalf of everyone else. So it's not always a race on who can file the lawsuit the fastest. But it does become a problem if the family members assume that somebody else is handling it and nobody ever does. This brings us to our next piece. What happens if no spouse, child, or parent files a lawsuit? What if no spouse, child, or parent files? Texas has a specific rule here that matters a whole lot. If none of the eligible family members file within 3 months of the death, then someone else has the opportunity to file. That person is the executor or the administrator of the deceased estate. But there's a catch. If the eligible family members ask that the personal representative or the executor or the administrator not file a wrongful death claim, well, then that stops them from being able to do it altogether. So think of the estate's role, or the administrator or the executor, as kind of a backup plan. It's always there, but it has specific rules. Now, I want to slow down here for a second, because there are two different types of claims that people often mix up. On one hand, you have what is called a wrongful death claim, and on the other, you have what is called a survival claim. The wrongful death claim is for the family's benefit. It's about what the family lost when the deceased passed away. A survival claim is typically on behalf of the estate that shows what the deceased went through before he or she passed away. We're talking about things like pain and suffering, medical expenses, and mental anguish. And that's a separate conversation. But I have to mention it because sometimes the families assume that the estate handles everything. But that's not always true, and it's not always the way that people think. But now let's address the toughest part: who cannot file? Because that is where families get blindsided. Who cannot file a wrongful death claim in Texas? This is where I get the most emotional phone calls. In Texas, siblings cannot file wrongful death claims. That includes any brothers or sisters, even if you were incredibly close. Grandparents typically cannot file. Grandchildren typically cannot file. Fiancés and unmarried partners typically cannot file unless you have that exception of the common law marriage. Friends, roommates, business partners, none of that qualifies. And I know that this feels cold, but it's important to have clarity in this situation because without knowing the truth and what the law is, sometimes family can be left out in the cold thinking that someone else is going to do it on their behalf. When that happens, families lose time and they lose options. Now, there's another group that also causes confusion: step parents and step children. In most cases, step relationships do not create standing to be able to file a wrongful death claim in Texas. But the key word here is legal adoption. If that step-parent relationship was formalized in the legal adoption process, that changes everything. But if someone helped raise a child without formally adopting them, the Texas law usually doesn't treat that as a parent-child relationship for wrongful death filing purposes. This is one of those areas where families assume that the emotional relationship is enough, but in court, it usually is not. So if step-parents or step-children are involved, that's another reason to get advice early about the wrongful death claim. So what happens when multiple family members all want to file, but they don't agree? That's more common than people think. When multiple people want to file. If the spouse, the children, and the parents are all eligible, they can all be involved. Sometimes they file it all together. Sometimes one person files and the others join. Sometimes the family doesn't agree on legal strategy. Texas courts can consolidate all of the different claims into one case so that it's not chaotic. And if the case resolves, the Texas court can step in to decide how the damages are allocated if there's a big disagreement. The big thing to understand is this: it's not about who files first. It's about making sure that the right people are included and the case is filed correctly. Now let's talk about the biggest mistake that families make the most: timing. Key takeaways and the 2 deadlines people miss. Here are the simple rules. Only the spouse, the children, and the parents have the right to file a wrongful death lawsuit in Texas. If none of them file within 3 months, the estate's executor or administrator can file with certain limitations. Siblings cannot file. Fiancés and partners cannot file unless they qualify as a common law marriage. Step relations usually require adoption to qualify. Now, the deadlines. First, that 3-month window matters a lot because it says who can step in if nobody files. Second, Texas has a statute of limitations, which is usually 2 years from the date of the death. If you miss that 2-year deadline, the case may be completely barred and you cannot collect any money for the loss of your loved one. Just to be clear, if your case is barred by the statute of limitations, it's not harder, it's over. And so if you're sitting with your family and you're thinking, we're grieving right now, we'll deal with this legal stuff later, I completely understand. But the Texas law does not pause because life is heavy. Now let me give you a quick example of why this matters. Real Texas example of knowing who can file matters. I've had cases where a family believes that a girlfriend can file on behalf of the deceased because they feel that she's basically family and they've been together so long, she's basically his wife. But legally, she wasn't. Months went by, and then the mother calls, and now we're scrambling to collect evidence that we should have been doing early on. On the flip side, when families call early and we can sort out who has standing and get all the right people on the same page, we can file the case correctly before timing becomes the enemy. That's the difference. It's not luck, it's just clarity and timing. Final thoughts and next steps. So here's the bottom line. If you're a spouse, a child, or a parent of the deceased, you may have standing to file a wrongful death claim in Texas. And if you're not, the Texas law is often strict, but you need to know what your options are now, not after months of guessing. Even if you are not sure if you qualify, it's better to get those questions answered now, because the worst outcome is not being told no. The worst outcome is waiting until there's nothing left for you to do. Now, if you found this helpful, you're going to want to watch our other video. It's called "This Wrong Move Could Destroy Your Car Accident Injury Claim," speaking to the insurance company before talking to a lawyer. People lose their strong cases to insurance adjusters every day, and you don't want to be one of them. Watch that video right now to protect your rights and avoid a huge mistake. I'll see you over there.